Dr. Karl Claxton, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Hayley.
We've come to talk about Papua New Guinea, and recently I was reading an article in the East Asian Forum by Professor Stephen Howes. Now, Professor Howes is the director of the Development Policy Centre at ANU, and his article is Papua New Guinea headed for a crisis? Can you speak a little bit about that?
That's a provocative title for an article, obviously. What Stephen's talking about is mainly the economic aspects of PNG's situation. Papua New Guinea was heading towards the strongest GDP growth in the world this year, but it's facing very strong economic headwinds. The plummeting of the barrel of oil to half its expected value will put a big dent in the government revenue. There are a bunch of other factors Stephen's talking about: the decision to spend $3 billion on a loan to buy equity in resource projects, the November budget being responsible but not setting out a clear path for getting the economy back on track, the central bank's offer to buy government bonds, and the refusal to really depreciate the kina, the national currency, as much as it needs to, just shows that the country faces some difficult economic times, and that's what Stephen's talking about for the most part.
So what about the political aspect of this whole situation?
Well, the government has reached the end of the 30-month period in which it's free from a vote of no confidence, and it's still got a thumping majority. The Prime Minister, Peter O'Neill, is a very capable politician, a very clever guy, and a very capable Prime Minister. There have been some worrying signs on the political front to me, though. Some of his ministers have talked about, in terms of emergency language, they use the phrase quite loosely, state of emergency, to refer to all sorts of fairly mundane problems in the economy, such as the problems they've had with the National Power Corporation. To me, that's a little dangerous in lowering the threshold for emergency measures, for extraordinary measures, when they have a genuine political crisis which could emerge in the future.
Now, you've talked about the economic aspects and the political aspects of what's happening in Papua New Guinea. There was going to be this whole economic boom, but now that might not happen this year. So what do you think about public expectations in PNG and how they may or may not be met this year?
I think there are two interesting aspects to that question. In the absence of a strong parliamentary opposition, because of the money politics which is entrenched in the country as it is in some of the neighbouring countries, politicians tend to flood to the government side, so there's not the strong parliamentary opposition that the framers of the Constitution were probably expecting and hoping for. That means that the opposition comes mainly from two areas. One is increasingly civil society, including in online voices, and secondly it comes through judicial mechanisms, through the Ombudsman Commission, through the courts, through task force sweep, which the Prime Minister has tried to disband, but which is still struggling to stay alive. And in the absence of a strong parliamentary opposition, I'm constantly concerned that the civil society voices are often quite wild and imprudent. They will call for military coups to throw out a corrupt government, they allege, and so that stream of the opposition has potential danger attached to it. And on the other side, the sort of courts and judicial side of what functions as an opposition also, to me, seems to overreach from time to time. There are a large number of MPs, and including senior ministers now, on charges or up against allegations of serious impropriety. And while in some senses it's good that the government is held to account and there are still checks and balances, I really do see a real danger in a degree of overreach by these institutions trying to hold the government to account in ways that really backs them into a corner and could encourage instability down the track.
So on balance, do you think that Papua New Guinea is actually heading for a crisis?
Look, Hayley, I'm an optimist on Papua New Guinea, but if you look at the two most common tropes on the country's politics, they're firstly that Papua New Guinea stands at a crossroads, and secondly, there's a wondering whether the Papua New Guinea's ability to muddle through periodic crisis has reached a point where it can't be stretched any further. And both of those tropes have never perhaps seemed as relevant as they do today. We do stand at a crossroads of Papua New Guinea really taking off. They've got APEC coming up in 2018 as the hosts. The population is growing, and that brings real economic benefits as well as challenges. But on the other side, you've got the same factors: the rapid population growth, the rapid urbanisation, the rapid social change, which hold out so much promise, also unleash forces which are very difficult to manage. And so I don't think. I mean, Stephen's article has a question mark at the end of it. Is Papua New Guinea in crisis? I don't think Papua New Guinea is in crisis at the present time, but I certainly think the next 18 months will bear very close scrutiny.
Dr. Claxton, that's a fantastic snapshot of Papua New Guinea and the challenges that it faces in the coming years. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Hayley. That's my pleasure.